The reason that I wrote the book is that initially the story was interesting. Everyone had already seen what had happened in court, but as with everything else, there's another part to the story, and that part was what I had brought to the courtroom. There were many decisions that I undertook, and I thought that it would be interesting to people who had actually watched the trial to find out what it was that I was thinking when I did these things. For example, why is it that I included some things in opening statement and not other things? For example, the gas cans, I kept them out of the opening statement, even though they were obviously very beneficial in proving the case. After Jodi Arias claimed that she had been attacked by Travis and that she had been forced to kill him in self-defense, I started looking through the rest of the documents that I had, and I came across a report that indicated that she had called an ex-boyfriend shortly before the trip asking to borrow 2 gas cans. It seemed an innocuous enough request, but to me, it seemed that California has enough gas stations so that carrying or wanting to borrow gas cans seemed to have another meaning to it or have another purpose for her. As I looked further into the case, I came across a Walmart receipt. And in that Walmart receipt, I was able to find that she had actually bought a 3rd gas can, so that at her disposal, she had 3 5-gallon gas cans for a total of 15 gallons. As I looked further into the case, I realized that the reason that she wanted this extra gasoline, this extra 15 gallons, was so that she could make her way through the Arizona desert from California without having to stop at a gas station, so there would be no record of her ever being here in Arizona. There would be no videotape, and there would be no receipts because she had the gasoline that she needed to make the trip. When I confronted her with the 2 gas cans that she had borrowed from the ex-boyfriend, she had already heard the ex-boyfriend testify and tell me that he had lent her those 2 gas cans. So she had some time to prepare an answer for that. What she didn't know was that I had already gone and checked with Walmart and found that she had actually borrowed a 3rd gas can. So at the latest opportunity, when she was still testifying, I asked her, why is it then that if you claim that you only had 2 gas cans, why is it that you filled up 3 gas cans in Salt Lake City? In her face, for probably the only time throughout the trial, there was a look that indicated that she was caught, that somehow she finally, for one thing, didn't have an answer. After a pause, she then sort of turned, answered my question, and said, well, I was never in Salt Lake City, which I knew wasn't true because I had the receipts to prove it. In anticipation of a hearing that we had to determine whether or not letters that had been provided to me by defense counsel indicating or supporting her self-defense claim, I was at the jail and I was sitting there with a officer. And as I sat there, I noticed that one of the people that visited her often was coming in. Arias immediately asked the guard to transfer or give her 2 magazines. In looking through the magazines, the jailers were able to see that in some of the creases there were some messages, and those messages were directed to somebody on the outside, indicating that they had, there's an expletive, indicating that they had messed up and that they needed to come and see her immediately so they could get this thing straightened out, because he or she contradicted whatever story Arias had been telling for the past year. My on-call shift had already been completed at 8 o'clock in the morning when I received a call later that morning at 8:30. And it was a sergeant from the Mesa Police Department telling me that they had found the body of this individual. And the only thing he really knew was that the individual's name was Travis Alexander. Rather than shirk this call onto the next individual, I decided to take the call. And I went out to East Mesa, when I was allowed inside after the scene had been secured, one of the things that caught my attention, and that I guess the word is impressed, was that it was very clean and meticulous downstairs. But I did get upstairs, and when I did get upstairs, I was able to see that in the bathroom there had been a horrific event that had taken place. At that point, I really didn't know exactly what had happened, but one of the things that I did know was that it was throughout the bathroom. The blood was on the floor, it was streaked on the walls, and Mr. Alexander had been stuffed into the shower. In looking at that, it appeared that whoever had done this was someone who was very angry and very upset, but they also had thought this thing through because they had actually taken time to clean things up. So even though there was a lot of blood, and even though there was plenty of violence, it spoke to a calculated, kind of thought out killing where the individual had been methodical in their approach to ending Travis Alexander's life. I never get calloused to the violence that I see, and it's almost on a day-to-day basis, and that's why I continue to work at the same place that I have been for the past 27 years. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was the camera. It was found by police in the washing machine. It had actually gone through the wash cycle and had been left behind. There was also bleach that had been added to the cycle when it was started. And in that camera, what police were able to find were a number or sets of photographs. There were actually 3 sets of photographs. The first set showed Arias and Mr. Alexander engaged in sexual activity. And it showed that the activity was on June 4th of 2008. And Arias, of course, claimed that she hadn't even been there on that particular date. So the police then knew that she was not telling the truth as to whether or not she was there on the day that he was murdered. But that was early in the afternoon. That was around 1:30 in the afternoon. The police were also able to find another set of photographs showing Travis Alexander in the shower. That was closer to the murder. That was around 5:30 in the afternoon, but not exactly at the time of the murder. The third set of photographs the police were able to uncover were 3 accidental or inadvertent photographs. Arias had been holding the camera, and at some point during the attack, the camera had dropped. And when it dropped and it hit the button so that a photograph was accidentally snapped, and it showed Arias' foot, and it showed Mr. Alexander's head as the blood streamed down his right shoulder, and it appeared that Arias was attempting to move him down the hallway. There's another inadvertent photograph that was also taken, and that is Arias but Arias pulling the body down the hallway. So that is really the piece of evidence that, if one wants to call it a mistake, that Arias made. She made a mistake in leaving that behind. The camera that actually took these photographs belonged to Mr. Alexander. It was a new camera, and Arias was tutoring him on how to use it. And that's the reason why they were using it, according to her, to take photographs at different stages. And it was this camera that belonged to him that actually was one of the keys in pointing the finger at her. From the very beginning of the case, it appeared that the main suspect was Jodi Arias. In speaking to the friends that were at the scene, her name kept coming up as someone who was a stalker, someone who was clingy. And so initially, although we didn't have any suspects, but her name kept coming up. She even called the police that June 10th and wanted to know what was going on in the investigation. She claimed that she was just an ex-girlfriend who was worried about him and really just wanted to know what happened. So initially, we didn't have any suspects. We just had an ex-girlfriend who was clingy, as I said, and was a stalker. Thereafter, it took some time for us to develop the photographs. It also took us some time to get the results back from the DNA analysis as well as the fingerprint analysis. The fingerprint analysis came back first, and there was a left palm print on the wall that was identified to Arias. Additionally, there was some biological matter, blood, that was tested for DNA, and it was found that that also matched her. So we knew, or at least the police knew at that point, that she had been there. Of course, you can't date DNA and you can't date the fingerprints, so we needed to find something that indicated when she had been there. And the photographs provided that because they showed she was there on June 4th of 2008. And once I had that, then it was my decision to go ahead and charge her with the premeditated murder. One of the most difficult things about the trial was the questioning of Jodi Arias during the cross-examination. And early on, I made the decision that I was going to not let her control the courtroom, as she had the media previously, where she had put out her story about not having killed Travis and no jury would convict her, and then continuing to talk to the media even after the case had already been filed. So one of the ways that I decided that I was going to control her, or control the questioning, because it's difficult to control a witness, is by making my questions very direct, and if I needed to, perhaps appear to be harsh. Had I not done that, she would have, in effect, told her story a second time if I had just asked her questions in an open-ended sort of fashion. And of course, at that point, she would have said whatever the story was that she was going to give. So I needed to do that. It wasn't a situation where I wanted to do it. It was more of a thing that it needed to be done. And I knew that if I did that, that she was going to become somewhat combative. So I was prepared for that. And she was combative at points, relying on a tried and true excuse that she couldn't remember. That was one of the things that she said. Another one was that somehow I had done something to her brain. And another of the excuses that she gave for not answering questions was that somehow there had been a fog that had set in. So any of those were fodder for her, and she used them to try to thwart to thwart my cross-examination. But in the end, it came across that she was somebody who just didn't want to answer the questions. It is humbling, actually, to think that people would find it interesting and that they would take it to heart like they have. So the overall feeling that I have with the warm reception is that I'm just humbled by the fact that people find it interesting what I was thinking at the time that these events were taking place. As in this case, as with all the other cases that I prosecute, I do the most that I possibly can. I prepare the best that I possibly can, and then I present it to the fact finder and ultimately the person or the entity, the jury, that is going to sentence the defendant. Once that decision is rendered, I do not think about it. I accept it and I move on. There is no benefit to me to look back and Monday morning quarterback what is going on or what could have been and that sort of thing. I choose to live in the present. I like to look in the future. So whatever happened with regard to this case and other cases with regard to sentencing, I move on and really don't think about it. I never say to myself, what could I have done differently? Because that's an exercise that would create nothing but problems, because I could spend the rest of my life talking about or thinking about what I could have done differently. I know that given the facts that I had, the evidence that I presented, and the amount of time that I spend with every case, I put the best foot forward. I prosecuted the case to the best of my abilities so that there is nothing that can be gained by questioning a sentencing or questioning what a jury has done other than to just move forward and remember that there are other cases and that require somebody to prosecute the offender or the murderer in my cases. So no, I do not ever think about the verdict. I just move on. I always focused on the actions or what it was that Jodi Arias had done to Travis Alexander. Not so much in the sexual field, but just what she had done to him on June 4th of 2008. How she had taken the knife and stabbed him. What she had done with the gun. So in terms of what the media covered or what was said on a nightly basis, it's not something that I paid particular attention to, and it's not something that I ever really worried about, because all I was concerned with was my part in this prosecution, and that is the presentation of the evidence and finding out and showing that Jodi Arias had not only premeditated, but had gone further and planned the murder of Travis Alexander. The defense strategy seemed to be to make this case about sex, not about murder. So it appeared that almost at every opportunity they would bring those issues up, whether it be from something Travis Alexander had written, whether it be something that Jodi Arias was saying that they had done sexually, or even to an extent of saying that Travis Alexander was a pedophile. But in bringing it up at almost every turn, one of the things that appeared to happen was that there was a callousing effect. The issues were raised so many times, they were blared through the courtroom on so many occasions that there came a point when the effect of the words and the effect of the conduct that they were describing seemed to have lost its impact. So it did appear that perhaps they being Jodi Arias and the team, went a little bit too far in constantly reminding the people in the courtroom that this case was about sex, not about what she did. And in doing that, perhaps, maybe it appeared that they didn't really focus on what had happened on June 4th of 2008. The one thing, and the only thing that I think that I could say to Travis Alexander is that I hope that he has at last found some peace, and that I hope that the things that were said to him, about him, during the trial, that somehow they are not so hurtful now that the defendant has been sentenced to natural life for the premeditated murder that she carried out back on June 4th of 2008. I work alone because that allows me to take a look at every part of the evidence and be responsible for every part of the items that are going to be presented. And for me, what that does is that allows me to make a more cohesive presentation to the jury. The jury gets used to my style, gets used to the tone of my voice. Clearly, they come in and they don't know what to expect. So if they hear, for example, that I'm being aggressive with somebody or assertive with somebody, it's something that they learn that it's not because I'm trying to be abusive. It's not that I'm trying to be hostile. It's just that I'm trying to move things along, and I want to perhaps save them some time. And I think that by working alone and being in front of them all the time, that juries and those that watch come to understand that the positions that I take and the comments that I make are made out of sincerity. They are not made just to pontificate or to present a facade as part of the prosecution. It is just that they get to know that I'm a sincere individual, and the questions that are being presented and the evidence that's being put forth for them to consider are important. And I think that the juries, by and large, and I think that judges have learned to appreciate. And so working alone allows me to move the case along quicker and allows me to, if possible, form some sort of bond, which might be too strong of a word, but at least have the jury be able to rely on something, and that's me presenting the case on a day-to-day basis. I ended the book by talking a little bit about my past, and specifically attending college and leaving the small town where I grew up in California, out in what is called the high desert of Southern California. And the reason that I included it was not to have people just know me for its own sake. I actually included it because it was relevant or important to how the how I prosecuted the Jodi Arias case. Of course, growing up, everybody learns things, and I learned certain things too. One of the things that I learned was that things are not what they seem all the time. So I talk about how I remembered Victorville as I left it, and in my mind, it was a very Shangri-La kind of place, but it isn't. But there were lessons that I learned there, and things that I learned there. And one of the things that I developed or learned was that there are things that you do, and there are things that you don't. And one of the things that you don't do is what Jodi Arias did to Travis Alexander.